In this lesson, we're going to begin scripting our character movement. Alright, so now we're getting into the process where we're going to begin scripting. This script is probably going to look a little foreign if you've never scripted before. If you've never touched Unity before, this might look a little foreign as well. But bear with me, I'll try to explain everything as we go along, trying to make it as easy as possible to understand. If you feel comfortable with scripting, you can follow along. But if you don't, and you just want to get to this moving around and how to hook up the script as a component, you can just use the script that I provided to you to place it right on the player as a component. Okay, so let's get started. First thing that we need to do is we need to create a folder that's going to hold all of our scripts. So we're going to call this folder scripts and hit enter. And then I'm going to double click on my scripts folder, then right click and create a new C# script. Now you could use JavaScript as well, but I'm more familiar with C#, so it's totally up to you. So we're going to be using the C# language here. So with this asset created, we need to give it a name, and I'm going to actually call this character movement and hit enter. So double click on that, and this will open up MonoDevelop. MonoDevelop is the environment that Unity uses for programming. And so I'm going to do just a little bit of cleanup on my brackets here. And actually, you know what? I like to go ahead and just get rid of this stuff. I like to start out clean. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create what's called variables. And variables hold data. And so let's type in the word public, as this is going to be a public variable. I want it to be accessible through the inspector. And I also want to have possibly have other scripts access this variable as well. So I'm going to make this a float type. Now a float is kind of like a decimal number, if you will. And then we're going to give it a name. So the variable name is going to be called speed. And we're going to set it equal to a default value, which is going to be 6F. Now 6 is the value. You need an F at the end of that for float value, so that way it knows how many zeros to put at the end of that. Usually when you use it like this, it's going to be 6.0, and that's it. Okay, let's end with a semicolon. And then I like to hit tab a couple of times to add in comments. So like the comment for this is the speed that the player will move. Okay, so that's how you can make a comment. Now we're going to go a little bit faster as we go along here. I'm going to create another public variable, also with a float type, and we're going to call this turn speed. And we're going to set this turn speed to, let's do a default value of 60. Again, you can make comments on this. Go ahead and try making a comment on your own with that. So it's just the same way that we did before. We'll say public float, and I'm going to set turn smoothing. So whenever I turn, I want this to turn at a nice rate. And so I'm going to have a variable that uses this smoothing, okay? Or actually a function, I should say, a math function called lerp. And what that will do is it will give us a nice smooth turn instead of just really, really quickly. We're going to set this value to 15F as just a default value. And then I'm going to start creating some private variables. Now these variables will not be accessible through the inspector, and no other script will be able to access them. Okay? Private variables are good, so use them as often as possible. You don't necessarily have to put private in front of it. You could actually just say vector3, okay? But I like to put private in front of it just so that way it's easy for me to see where everything is. Now a vector3 type is basically x, y, and z. So it's a variable that holds x, y, and z data. Okay, so for 3D positions, this is perfect. So we're going to use movement as our variable name, and I'm just going to put a semicolon at the end of that. Now you might be wondering, why didn't we put an equal sign? Well, I'm going to actually put data into this, I don't want to put a default value on that. Okay, so we're going to say private, and we'll do another vector3, and this is going to be for turning, and we're going to set that just to itself. We're not going to set a default value. And then we need another private variable, and this is going to get our animator, and we're just going to give it the variable name anim, and then one more private variable, and this is going to be a rigid body, not 2D though, rigid body, and then we're going to call this player rigid body. Perfect. All right, so those are our variables. Now we're going to start writing out some functions. The first function I'm going to write out is called the awake function, and this is a Unity function. So void awake, anything inside of an awake function will run regardless whether the game has, or the object that this particular script is on has been instantiated. So it's going to get it right at the beginning whenever the game starts. So usually an awake function is used to get references. Okay. And so I'm going to get my animator, and I need to set it to the anim variable name. And I'm going to get component, and the component that I want to get is the animator. And the way that I've written this is that it's going to get the animator that is on the object that this script is on. So we're going to put this on the player game object, and it's going to get the animator that is on the player game object. Okay. And then we need one more. We need to get the player rigid body, and we're going to set this equal to get component, and the component we want to get is rigid body. Perfect. Now that's everything I need in my awake function. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to write my fixed update function. Now this is another Unity function, and this function is used primarily to get things like movement. And a fixed update function will update every single physical frame. So every time the computer runs, it has a frame in which the physics of the computer will run, okay, of Unity. Okay, and it's very, let me say, it's very stable. Okay, it happens at correct intervals. Okay, and so it's not varying. It's nice and steady. And so what I want to do now is I want to store my input axes. Okay, now input, okay, is basically what you do whenever you press the keyboard. So whenever you press the W key, you are inputting the W key. Whenever a player presses the A button on a gamepad, that is inputting the A button, or even the joystick. Now axis or axes are normally used for joysticks, okay, or movement, W, A, S, and D if you're a PC player. So what I want to do is I want to create a float value, and I want to call this LH, and what that stands for is left stick horizontal movement, so on the X and Y. I'm going to set this equal to input.getAxis raw, and we're going to set the input name or the axis name to horizontal, or actually we're going to get the information from the horizontal axis name or input name. We'll do float, and we'll do LV equals input.getAxis raw, and we're going to say vertical. Okay, so vertical is going to be if you're pressing the left thumbstick forward, or if you're pressing the W or S key. A and D will be horizontal or left and right on the joystick. Now you might be asking me, okay, where is this horizontal and where is this vertical? Where does that come from? That actually comes from the input properties. You can find this under your project settings. So if you go to Edit, Project Settings, Input. This is called the Input Manager. And you'll see we have horizontal and vertical, and we actually have two versions of this. One is used for the keyboard, and another is used for the gamepad. So if I expand out horizontal, you'll see there is the name that I'm looking for, and this has some very specific parameters that are set up for a joystick. Now I would also be able to use the W, A, S, and D keys for horizontal and vertical because of the naming. So let's go ahead and go back to MonoDevelop, and we're going to go ahead and stop right here with our, actually, you know what, let's finish out the fixed update. We've got just a little bit to go with this. So after we get the input, okay, so we're going to start storing a value based on our movement of the left joystick. We want to actually physically move the player character. So we're going to call a function, and I'm going to call this function move, and right now it's not recognizing that. I apologize. Let me actually skip that. No, let's put it in. I'm going to put move, and it's not going to let me do it because IntelliSense is trying to say, hey, that doesn't exist, what are you trying to do? And as you can see, it's saying this is the only thing that I recognize in the script. While it is very intuitive, it can create things like this. And so what I can do instead, let me go ahead and just remove this. Let's create the two functions that we need for this. I'm going to say void move, and on my move I'm going to type in float LH and LV. So what it's doing is it's actually going to take the information that is passed from the left thumbstick, okay, or W, A, S, and D. So here we have this. I'm not going to put anything in here. I'm just going to say move the player. Just a comment for now. We'll take that out in just a little bit. And then I need one more function just like it called void animating, and we're going to pass in that same information for that. So we're going to do float LH and float LV. Perfect. Okay. So now that we have that, let's put our brackets in there, and that should be everything that we need. So now if I go back to my fixed update, I can actually type in move, and you'll see that it shows up now. And inside of move, we're calling this function. We need to tell it what information to pass through. So we're going to put in LH and LV. End with a semicolon. And then we'll need one more, and it's called animating. And then we're going to pass in the same information. Oops, let's make sure we do LH and then LV. Perfect. All right, so now it recognizes that. Let's hit Control S to save our script. And then if we go back to Unity, we can go ahead and take this script and we can put it onto our player character. Now you'll notice here at the bottom we'll get some errors that show up, and it's saying identifier expected. So if you double click on that, it's going to bring it up inside of MonoDevelop, and it'll actually highlight what's going on here. So I put in float LV and or LH and LV, but I don't need that because it's already up in right here. So let's actually take that float off of there. Oops. So hit Control S, go back to Unity, and you'll see that that has now disappeared. If I hit clear, it'll clear everything out except for anything that's outstanding. So now my move, I got it backwards on this. My move is looking for float on both of those. And there's my animating. I have that. Hit Control S to save. And it looks like that will disappear. Let's clear that out. There are some warnings on there, and that's just kind of showing us, hey, the script's not quite complete. You've got some things in there that probably aren't necessary. It's not being used. Totally fine. So what we're going to do in our next lesson is we're going to finish up the movement script. I'm going to show you how to physically move the character, and we'll talk about how that ties into animating the character as well.